Good afternoon. EU leaders have denounced a violent government crackdown in Belarus and have agreed not to recognise the results of the country's presidential election. The European Council held emergency talks today on the political crisis, which has gripped Belarus since authoritarian leader Alexander Lukashenko won his sixth term in office last Sunday. Opposition leaders say that the vote was rigged, and the EU today agreed to back up those claims.
We don't recognise the results presented by the Belarus authorities. The people of Belarus deserve better. They deserve the democratic right to choose their leaders and shape their future. We call on the Belarusian authorities to find a peaceful way out of the crisis by ending the violence, de-escalating tensions and launching an inclusive national dialogue.
Well, let's speak to our correspondents who are in Brussels as well as Minsk. In Minsk, we've got Annelies Borges. In Brussels, it's Jack Parrock. We're going to go to Brussels first. Now, the European Council wants to see a free and fair solution, as it said, in Belarus. How are they going to ensure this happens, though, Jack?
Well, what they're saying is that the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe should have some kind of mission there. They want to facilitate some sort of dialogue. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen went so far to say that there should be a peaceful democratic transition of power in Belarus. Now, that will be accused by Russian President Vladimir Putin, probably, and also President Lukashenko of Belarus, of interfering in the political affairs of Belarus. It's important to also say that Charles Michel, the European Council President, asserted that this is a domestic protest movement and that it isn't a geopolitical issue, as President Lukashenko has been saying that it is.
Jack, how much of a rift could this generate between the EU and Russia, say?
A pretty major one, Oliver. When you look at the Ukraine crisis 5 years ago, that created huge tensions between Moscow, Brussels and the European capitals. I think it's of real concern what happens now. We know from the EU Council President Charles Michel that they are going to, quote, sanction, quote, a substantial number of people. They're going to do asset freezes and travel bans. Those are things that happen in the long term, long and medium term effects, but really what they're looking for and what they're calling for is free and fair elections. Now, on the sanctions, there was a lot of talk about how that would work, who they would target, and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also spoke about it.
We will sanction all those responsible for violence, repression, and falsification of the results of the election. The people of Belarus took peacefully to the streets, and the authorities answered with violence, and this cannot be accepted.
So I think we can say, Oliver, that this is a pretty strong message from the EU Council today. We were talking about a bit of a fine line being treaded. They seem to have sort of come out swinging and supporting the call for a fresh election in Belarus. They haven't officially supported any specific opposition leader, as one would expect them not to do. That would be definitely considered interference. But they've really laid down some strong measures. Now we have to watch and see what the response from Moscow is.
Jack Parrock, thanks very much for joining us from Brussels. Over to Minsk now, where our correspondent Annelies Borges has had official reaction from one of the opposition parties. Annelies, what did they have to tell you?
Hi there, Oliver. Well, indeed, members of the opposition, particularly that opposition movement that challenged Alexander Lukashenko on Sunday's August 9th election, said that they rejoice in the fact that the EU is interested in a peaceful solution to the crisis here in Belarus and in supporting Belarusians to make their voices heard. They also said they appreciate the EU's stance of not interfering in the country. They are adamant that a solution to this crisis must be found by Belarusians themselves with the support of their international partners. They can now, of course, count on that support. They also said they are in close communication with the EU ambassador here in Minsk.
Now, how much of a blow is this going to be to President Lukashenko, and how could he respond to the EU's statements today?
Oh, it's a very good question, Oliver. It's going to be very interesting to see how Alexander Lukashenko responds to this. He had actually sent a message to the EU via his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, saying that the EU better not interfere in Belarusian domestic politics. Is going to be interesting also to say what he does in view of more protests that are very likely to be scheduled in the next few hours and days as a result of this very clear message from the EU that they have their support. What we know so far is that the Belarusian president has issued new orders to the interior minister saying that they should prevent unrest in the country and as well as strengthen border control to prevent, and I quote, militants, weapons, ammunition and money from other countries to enter Belarus. Of course, Lukashenko has insisted that this whole opposition movement is funded by foreign powers without specifying who exactly might be behind this opposition. We also heard from the Central Election Commission in the last few minutes saying that the inauguration of President Alexander Lukashenko will take place within the next 2 months without specifying a date for it just yet.
And Annalise, just quickly, it now looks like the European Union and Russia are going toe-to-toe in trying to get Alexander Lukashenko to pick one side. But that's going to be a very difficult task, isn't it? Because historically, Alexander Lukashenko has tried to court both sides, sometimes at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know that Alexander Lukashenko will understand this message from the EU as them lending a hand to him. He is most likely going to see this as the EU antagonizing his side and refusing to accept that he is the winner of the elections here in Belarus. Alexander Lukashenko has been adamant that no fresh elections would be held in this country. He actually challenged protesters that if they wanted new elections, they would have to kill him first. He's most likely going to once again count or at least ask for the support of his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, who has been seen as his biggest ally in the last few weeks. Of course, other countries have also sent their congratulatory messages after the elections, including China and Turkey. But so far, in the region, Alexander Lukashenko has only been able to count on the support of Russia. It's going to be interesting to see what Russia does next, if Russia is going to come out and say that it stands next to side by side to Alexander Lukashenko. If that doesn't happen, Alexander Lukashenko might seem weaker than ever. Of course, we have seen major blows to his authority, to his credibility in the last few days. The crackdown, the brutal crackdown staged by authorities here in Belarus against protesters did not help his image internationally, neither domestically. Many of his former supporters were quite concerned about the pictures that they saw in the streets. They are not exactly vocal right now. Alexander Lukashenko's supporters are actually hard to find, or at least to make them speak to us. But it's going to be interesting to see how now this latest move by the EU plays out here in Belarus, and of course what Alexander Lukashenko does next with this information.
Annalise Borges, Jack Parrick, thank you both for joining us. A quick reminder, Euronews was one of the first international broadcasters to cover this story ever since Sunday. We will be keeping an eye on developments and we'll bring them to you right here.